We want to begin this segment by discussing the emotional pit of having a wounded spirit. A wounded spirit develops when you take up an offense against someone who's done you no direct harm. You become bitter or resentful toward an individual because of what he or she did to someone else.
This is an insidious situation to get yourself into. You're bitter and unforgiving, which makes you unforgiven by our Father, and no one's done anything against you.
Nurturing a wounded spirit is one of the most difficult sins to escape. It's not as though someone has done anything to you so that they need to ask you forgiveness. You've trapped yourself with a seething resentment behind a wall of bitter feelings.
One of the most common sources of wounded spirits is mothers. A woman who lives in apprehension toward her husband condemns her children to years of cohabiting with a wounded spirit. An apprehensive mother manipulates her children so they'll take up her resentment against her husband. And the type of bitterness found in the wounded spirit is the worst kind, begrudging.
Sadly, once a child learns the pattern of developing a wounded spirit, strongholds will stir them as adults to pick up wounds on behalf of others. Think about it. People who give way to a wounded spirit live in resentment against people who've never done anything against them.
When Mike first began to counsel clergy back in New England, he found that over half their wives were going to professional counselors because they were guilt-ridden by a wounded spirit.
Their husbands would complain to them about different people in the faith community with whom they were having trouble. The loving wife would then take up an offense on behalf of her husband.
Over time, her husband would reconcile with the person, but the wife was trapped. What does she do? Walk up to the former offender and say, "I was really mad at you for the way you treated my husband." Never. She'd go to a professional counselor to unload her seething resentment.
I remember a wonderful girl in her late 20s who was part of our singles group that met at our retreat center. When we first encountered her, we marveled that such a great gal avoided men and even the idea of marriage.
As we got to know her better, she revealed to us that she had deep-seated bitterness toward her dad. It wasn't against anything he did to her, but to her kid brother. By taking up an offense on his behalf, she was trapped by a wounded spirit and angry at men in general.
We encouraged her to go to her father and confess this. She did. And a short while later, God sent a wonderful man into her life and they were married.
Now that you're free from strongholds, we want to encourage you. Whenever someone tries to recruit you into taking up an offense against another person, don't. Remember this. A deceitful person stirs up strife, and a slanderer can separate even close friends. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 28.
And the deeper the slanderer goes into the gory details, the more wounded you become. If you listen, thinking you're being sympathetic, you've been demonically snared.
You'll take the gossip's burden on yourself, and you'll be seduced into the stronghold of bitterness against that absent third party.
If you want to avoid this ugly prison, keep in mind two biblical principles. The first to present his case seems right, till another comes forward and questions him. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 17.
This principle is foundational to our legal system. Both parties in a case, the accused and the accuser, have the right to present their case together to an impartial jury.
If both parties aren't present during the discussion, then you can't listen. Just like taking your thoughts captive and bringing them into obedience to Jesus, you must refuse to listen to detrimental information about another person if they're not there to defend themselves.
When I was a kindergarten teacher in a Christian school, I wrote the parents a note. I won't believe everything your kids say about you if you don't believe everything they say about me.
Closely related to this principle of hearing both sides of the story at the same time is the scriptural summary. So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. Matthew chapter 7, verse 12.
You need to realize that you will face situations in which someone tries to share information about you with others. Do you want people you've never hurt, or maybe never even met, to take up offenses against you?
Nobody does. That's why you need to refuse to listen to anyone who's sharing negative information about someone else. All you need to do is say, "Please stop. It's wrong for me to listen to this. I'll be glad to meet with you both so I can hear both sides of the story."
Once you've stopped the person from sharing gossip with you, you might want to ask the offended person if they can find it in their heart to forgive the one who hurt them.
This question will test their love for their supposed offender. And Peter declares a wonderful truth. Love covers over a multitude of sins.
If the offended person refuses to forgive, then you're now obligated to bring both parties together so you can justly hear both sides of the story at the same time.
Again, if you listen to only one person's version, you'll be sinning as a recipient of slander and gossip.
And you'll need to go to the accused person and ask forgiveness for listening. It's better to be proactive in restoring the relationship than be a participant in its division.
Just a warning. Most Christian counseling violates the two principles we just mentioned. I've spoken with many counselors and haven't met one who doesn't side with the first person who presents their case. This is especially true when they listen to wives who speak against their husbands.
Counseling in much of the Christian community is unbiblical in nature. Many feel they're counseling someone when they listen to detrimental one-sided information about someone who's not present. But what the listener doesn't realize is that Satan has just seduced them into the sin of gossip and slander, and possibly a wounded spirit.
And sadly, the majority don't even realize they've sinned.